多謝各位嚟臨20世紀香港天主教會歷史研究講座系列及研討會嘅活動啦。咁呢一個活動咧就係由香港中文大學天主教研究中心、香港教區公教部同埋檔案處一齊合辦嘅。咁今日我哋嘅講座咧就由田神父、田英傑神父咧就幫我哋介紹個講者。
It's my honor to introduce Dr. Ayako Fukushima to the Assembly. She is assistant professor at the School of Design of Kyushu University in Japan, specialized in heritage studies. She has been in contact with Hong Kong since 2006 in order to collect material for her doctorate thesis on late involvement in Catholic Church buildings in Hong Kong, interpretation within religious, social, and political contexts from 1950s to 2015. And I have to thank her. After publishing the doctorate thesis, sent a copy to me and to other people that she has interviewed and collecting all this. Thank you. Then Dr. Fukushima has previously worked as an heritage conservation specialist at UNESCO Beijing office from 1999 to 2001. She was granted with the Fulbright Scholarship for the graduate study of historic preservation at University of Pennsylvania from 2002 to 2004. She joined the Kyushu University in 2006, and now she's teaching there. Her research interests include history of religious heritage in and outside Japan, including Hong Kong. Another point that I would like to mention, she's a very good Christian, and she has been working in a parish where Pia, my father, has been working, so she was familiar with Pia, my father. So welcome, Dr. Fukushima, to talk to us.
Oh, thank you for that, Kofi. And thank you, everybody, for spending your precious Saturday afternoon with me. So, as he introduced, I've been coming to Hong Kong over 10 years. And around 2008-9, I started research about the lay Catholics' involvement, participation in our church building project in Hong Kong. So I published a bunch of papers, and after many years, I finally finished my dissertation. And so this is one of the church in my neighborhood in Japan, and actually in my city of Fukuoka, there are quite a few Catholic churches, but most of the time it's empty. I mean, nobody's using except the Sunday Mass, which is usually just one. And this one in Nagasaki, in Goto Island, this was a church, but it's not even a church anymore. This is just a heritage building, or nothing is there, just a touristic spot. So we have a lot of buildings, but it's vacant because empty because there are no people. I mean, there are very few Catholics in Japan. So during my first project, I developed my interest in the church buildings. So the past few years, and also currently, I'm doing my second project about the church buildings in Hong Kong. But as you know, quite a few churches in Hong Kong don't even have buildings. You may have mass or some other church activities in schools or somewhere. So either church buildings or a space of worship, place of worship. So I've been studying not only from the architectural point of view, but also from the sociological point of view. So since last year, I've been doing a residential research in Hong Kong, and thanks to everybody who helped me. I've been very productive. I've published a bunch of papers, and the book is coming up in September, which will be in English later. So traditionally, this is a very general thing. Traditionally, the churches or church buildings or church architecture has been studied from these kind of perspectives. Style, it's architecture style, or you can call it design. So people used to categorize churches as, Romanesque or Gothic or modernism or whatever. And also churches have been studied from the technological point of view, what kind of materials have been used, what kind of building materials, finishes, or what kind of building method has been used, and so on. Then another major methodology is the perspective is plan, building plan. Latin close, square, and fan shaped, and all kinds of analysis. So traditionally, church buildings has been studied as a religious, artistic, and technological product. There's nothing wrong about this, but when we look at the churches in Hong Kong, those kind of perspectives they are not really useful that much. So I will tell you why later. And so I have conducted a comprehensive survey of Catholic churches in Hong Kong. Means I've tried to identify all the Catholic churches which existed in Hong Kong, so including the existing ones, non-existing ones, but at least that was used for the public worship for a certain period of time. So so far, I identified at least 360 churches. Actually, there were more, but I couldn't identify the exact location or name of the church. So this is the minimum number. So I've developed a set of new perspectives to look at the churches in Hong Kong. So what is interesting about the churches in Hong Kong is that first of all, it's a mixed use. While if you go to Japan or other places, the church is church usually, then nothing else. But in Hong Kong, church is often it's school, it's social services center, and even it is with the commercial use. So there's all kinds of mixture of use, and quite often there's no exclusive space of worship. There's no exclusive space of religious activities in Hong Kong. So you have to use the one space for multiple purposes in Hong Kong. And the church in Hong Kong are not always permanent. You have permanent churches, but also you have temporary and transitional churches a lot. And there are different owners, which are also particular about Hong Kong. Some churches are owned by, the buildings are owned by the government or private entity. So I like to look at the churches in Hong Kong as a social product rather than their architectural aesthetic product. So, this is almost my conclusion, but I will give you this first because, so I identified the factors which brought changes to the types of church buildings in Hong Kong. So, number one, demographic changes. Number and type of people changed a lot. Like in the beginning of the history of Hong Kong, most of the Catholics were colonizers, they were Westerners, but gradually it was taken over by the Chinese and refugees, and a lot of children were coming up. Then the government town planning and also the property market affected a lot. And well, for me, the most important factor, the most influential factor is the church-state relations. So during the colonial time, church and the government were very cooperative, friendly relationship, but gradually, because of this China factor, church was kind of forced to be independent, which I will talk later. So this is what I discovered, but let me tell you details later. So you will ask, then what are you doing this, for what? So of course, my job is not making a list of churches. It's just part of my job. But my job as a historian is to produce meta-knowledge, means knowledge for knowledge. In other words, I have to provide a new perspective of history. So my question is, what is the modality of religion and secularization in Hong Kong? Even though I'm studying the Catholic churches, but I need to understand the churches in the perspective of secularization. Because Hong Kong is a very much secularized society, after all. Not only Hong Kong, everywhere now. So this is a very general the theories of sociological theories of secularity, very famous. In general, secularity is understood as a retreat of religion in public life, separation of church and state. And that's secularity. And the definition too is decline in belief and practice. So that means, fewer and fewer people go to church or temples or those kind of things. Yeah, very simple. But the understanding of secularity after the late 20th century, these few decades, is this one. Actually, religion does not decline. It does not disappear. It doesn't die out at all. But only the conditions of belief changes. Nowadays, there are a lot of options for you, plurality. A lot of options for you. You can be a Christian, you can be an atheist, you can be a Buddhism, you can be a Sunday Christian or whatever. There are a lot of options. So being faithful or being religious is just one of many options. It's just one. Whereas if you are in the medieval time or even the pre-modern time, there was no choice. You have to go to church or you have to go to temple. You have to join a kind of at least one of the religious community, but not now. So this has been understood as not the decline of religion, but it's a recomposition. Religion has been, it's always there, but it's being recomposed all the time. So in such a society, the church, just being one option among many others, needs to keep on demonstrating the meaning and usefulness, practical usefulness for the secularized society. Church has to prove that church is useful, helpful. And so that church keeps devising space of worship. So this is the reason why there are different types of buildings in form, use, or owners. And in the sociological term, this is called like adaptation, appropriation, hybridization. But this is boring, so I'm not going to talk too much about this thing. But anyway, so religion has been recomposed always. So this will be the meta knowledge if I can do. So let me go back. Let me talk about what I found out. So I tried to understand what types of churches have existed. And I tried to categorize from the four perspectives that I provided. Permanency, exclusive religious space, owners, and also use of the mixture of uses. So from the very beginning of colonization, what was there? What the missionaries established was the mission station, so-called. So many of them are gone now, so I can't really give you very good pictures, but this is the oldest chapel in Chekam. But this is already the better mission station. It's more like a permanent one. So they established a lot of mission stations, mostly in the rural areas. So at least I have found out 130 mission stations. At least, actually there were a lot more. At least 200 to 300, but I couldn't identify the exact location. So far 130. Then mission station is usually it was used as a school, or it was a place for the priests to stay. So the mixed use, and so therefore the space was not exclusive for religious activities. And mission station was meant to be a temporary facility, but some became permanent churches later. And the buildings were usually owned by the church, but some were like a rent from the villagers and so on. And there was no such involvement of the government in establishment of mission stations, except the vernacular schools, which were subsidized government. So there was not much government involvement. So I tried to map out the location of the mission stations. The dots and the stars are mission stations, which I could identify the locations. So the gray colored area is the inhabited, populated area. So you can see that it's been very well planned out. That there are mission stations in all the inhabited areas, especially in the new territories. So I believe that the missionaries were very strategic, very tactic in allocating the mission stations. So in the 20th century, mission stations gradually becomes a bit sophisticated, like this one. So this was like a second generation of the mission stations. So it's in between temporary small station to the permanent proper very big one. So this was very small in terms of size. It's really very small. Probably can accommodate 150 people, something like that. Very small chapel on the ground floor, and the first floor is 5 classrooms, and the second floor is the police quarter. So this was the St. Francis of Assisi Church and Datum School in Kowloon City, which was built in 1937, and as a kind of mission station. But this was demolished in 1943 by the Japanese for them to expand their airport. So that's why we got a new church in Shekipmeng, then St. Francis of Assisi Church in 1955. So that was a replacement of this church. So at the same time, the proper permanent church were built. I don't need to spend too much time on this because you know what is the standalone permanent church, cathedral, or St. Margaret Church, St. Teresa Church, this is really the church that people usually think about. So I found at least 30 of them existed, standalone church, and usually there's no mixed use. Therefore, there was an exclusive space of worship. Yeah, it's a permanent church, and it's of course owned by the church. But there was loosely interdependent church and government relationship, because the colonial government was very cooperative to give the church the site. Sometimes they give the financial assistance in the construction. So the government was very, very friendly and cooperative. So so they were in a very good relationship, and at the same time, there were not too many, but school chapel were used as for the public worship from time to time. So this is one of the first examples. Recently renovated the chapel, the Canossian Chapel on the Ken Road. So what I mean by school chapel is that it's a Catholic school, usually operated by the religious congregations. So they quite often they have a proper chapel. But originally it's meant for the school use only, but somehow they open to the public. So it's not really the private anymore. So this is also open to the public. Also we can go on Sunday. Yeah. Oh, altar is back. Yeah, like why? And this is a lot later, but yeah. The chapel was opened to the public in 1959. So 25, I've identified 25 of them opened to the public. Well, actually the chapel is chapel, but I'm talking about the compound and the buildings. So it's usually it's school. So chapel is one part of the school. Sometimes it's an independent building, but sometimes it's just one room in the building. But it's an exclusive space for the religious activities, and it's meant to be a permanent church, chapel, and of course it's owned by the church. But again, for this kind of schools, Catholic schools and chapels, there were also very kind of loose interdependent church and government relationships. Government was again very willing to support such schools from the very beginning. Then I jump to the post-war period. So what was built, what was established as a church after the war is chapels in refugee settlement. Well, you know very well that a lot of refugees they came to Hong Kong even before the war, but even more after the war. So the missionaries established social services facilities in the areas where the refugees settled temporarily. Because of the temporary nature, most of this kind of chapel is gone. It's gone, but there are a few remains. One of them is this one in Homonting. I don't know why this remained. This was not demolished, and I hope I can find that. But anyway, it's being renovated and converted into the diocesan pastoral center for the disabled. Another example now is still there, Fotak. Originally this entire compound was the social services center for the refugees. This photo must be from probably 70s or 80s, but anyway. Well, now this is not open to the public now, so it's not like this now. It's just like a storage now. Yeah. So I have found that 14 chapels in the refugee settlement, and what is interesting is that all of them were established in a few years' time, 1952, 53, 54, early 50s, because of the refugee influx. And this kind of chapel was used for all kinds of purposes: school, nursery, clinic, factory, preschoolers, for everything. So of course there's no exclusive space of worship. It meant to be a temporary facility, but some of them are still there, but most of them are gone. And even though I can't find out too much information about those, but it seems most of them are actually owned by the church, but quite often the site was provided by the government. So when the government clears refugee settlement, the government resumed the site. So that's why the buildings are all gone. So after the war, church and government became very much interdependent. So the government provided the site, even the building construction cost, subsidized. They subsidized a lot. So the two parties really became very much interdependent. And slightly later, in the 50s, there's still a lot of refugees are coming, and Catholic Church established a permanent kind of churches, which I call church and school complex. There are many. I mean, all of them are still there. The first one was I gave you the wrong information. The first one it's gone now. It was the Wan Chai Church, Gairap School, and Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church, which is replaced now. And it was built in 1950, but it's gone now. So I think this was the second, St. Anthony's Church and School. So this is like the third one, St. Francis of Assisi. So you do have quite a spacious, large space exclusively reserved for the Mass and liturgy. So at least a few hundred, 500, and the St. Francis of Assisi is 1,000, so which is very close to the capacity of cathedral, the second largest. Still, like St. Jude's, again, very the huge church. Now it's a kindergarten. the school was closed, now it's kindergarten. So a lot of those church and school complexes were established mostly in the 50s and early 60s. And I have found at least 23 of them. Yeah, even though it has an exclusive space of worship, which has a capacity of between 300 and 1,000, but they always have schools, right? And fish quarters, they must. They must. So there's no standalone churches after the war in principle. Then it's a permanent church. Most of them are still there, still used, very much used, and it's owned by the church. But in order to build this kind of church, government and church worked very closely. They were very interdependent. In the beginning, the church tried to be independent, but government was generous enough to give you the free no land premium for the school portion, two-thirds of the price, two-thirds of the land premium for the church and 100% for the police quarter. So that was the deal between the church and government. Yeah, so the Catholic Church still needs to spend a lot of money, but they could secure the permanent church space. So this is like a concept model. So there are a lot of variations, but this is just a concept. So you usually have you usually can find like a hall or covered playground on the ground floor. Then upstairs you have a church. Then you have classrooms, teachers' rooms, priest quarters, and upstairs. So at least those spaces are permanently owned by the churches. Yeah, this is St. Francis of Assisi. They change the use a lot, but this is the ground floor. Yeah, this is a hall, and yeah, the first floor is the church, the huge church. This is a priest quarter. The school wing is here. Yeah, so this is my latest project. My latest project is about the architects who built a lot of Catholic churches in the 50s and 60s. So yeah, I've been studying those guys. Chin Nai, he built St. Francis of Assisi, St. Jude, St. Anne, Our Lady of Rosary, one in Taipo. He built many, many churches in a short period of time. So those people are very interesting. So I've been studying those people. And slightly later, church, the Catholic Church realized yeah, they just changed their building policy a little bit. Oh, sorry, no, sorry, that's something else. I'm not talking about it. Yeah, at the same time, in the 1950s, since the 1950s, church also used private buildings in order to deal with the increasing refugees, increasing Catholics. There are not too many Catholic churches which are in the private buildings, whereas a lot of Protestant denominations use private buildings, what you call the upper floor church and so on. Not too many, but there were a few examples, several examples, especially in the 1950s and 60s. And this is gone. This is gone. But this was in the middle of the Nathan Road, called St. Joseph the Worker Chapel in Catechumenate. So obviously, it's in the the rental space in the commercial building. So a lot of people were working in this area, and this was like somehow in between St. Francis of Assisi and St. Teresa Church. So, this is much later, but yeah, one of the example. Yeah, the church is here. Actually, church is here. Yeah, but no, not too many. No? Yeah, church is here. On the, and this is also the recent interesting use of luxurious, apartment building. Yeah, they are using the clubhouse, like a wedding banquet hall or something for Sunday Mass, which is interesting. And this is the latest example of the use of the private building. This is a transitional church, St. Peter Church for the sea apostolate, for the seafarers. So they used to be in the Mariners Club, but since it's been redeveloped, they are temporarily using the floor in the private building in Jordan. They will be here for a few more years. But what is interesting is that they are on their own. The diocese is not involved in this church. I mean, at least Lent and those kind of things, not at all. Diocese is not taking care. So they are on their own. And there are masses at a private farm, which I haven't really investigated yet. But this is really example. And this might be where you may need to go in the future. You may have more of this in the future, unfortunately. So anyway, the church in the private buildings, I have founded 31 of them, mostly in 50s and 50s, 60s, 70s. And well, there's usually no exclusive spaces, but sometimes yes. And those places were used for schools, priest quarters, social service centers. It was mostly for refugees and working class people. So it meant to be transitional, but some became permanent. And so it was, usually church was just a tenant, but sometimes church purchased, they purchased a unit of the building. So obviously there's no involvement of the government in this type of building. Slightly later, in the 60s, mostly in the 60s, the Catholic Church didn't build church and school complex anymore because this costs a lot of money. This is expensive building and takes more time, and so church realized that there's a cheaper way to establish and cheaper and quicker way to establish a church in the Catholic schools without exclusive space of worship. So this was to deal with the increasing children of refugees, and missionaries were very happy to save a lot of money to construct. This was the first one, very first one. Still there, in Kunton. So essentially, this is a school. But this is also called St. John the Baptist Catholic Mass Center. So this is a mass center, right? There's a covered playground on the ground floor, and so on the weekdays, the kids are using as a covered playground properly, but on weekends this becomes a mass center, right? So this is also the earliest the same year as the St. John the Baptist. One I see same, the ground floor, covered playground, but it's also what they call chapel. Yeah, so there were at least 24 of them, mostly in the 60s. So essentially, it's a school. It's a school, but because this is a private building, the owner of the building is a Catholic church, so you can have a priest quarters on the top floor usually. It's as a owner you have a freedom to do that, but mostly because of the money issue and also the time of the construction, there's no such exclusive space. No, there's just a hall, school hall, a covered playground. Yeah, but it's a permanent church. All of them are still used, today. Yeah, but it's owned either by the diocese or by the religious congregations. And the relations between church and government became even more interdependent. Well, because it's a school, the church did not need to pay any land premium because it's school. School is free. But they did pay. They did pay for the priest quarters. They did pay, but it's a lot of saving, a lot cheaper than the church and school complex. Then, since it's a school, so the hall is meant to be the educational use. But of course, the government was very tolerant and very understanding of the church, using the covered playground or hall for the mass and liturgy. That was completely okay, and even today, it's still okay. So this was a very cheaper and quicker way to have a church. Well, this is a concept model. Yeah, so there's no exclusive permanent church space. So usually you have covered playground or hall on the ground floor, sometimes first floor. Then the church calls it mass center. By the way, mass center it's a coined word, particularly in Hong Kong. There's nothing like that exists in other places. There's no mass center outside of Hong Kong. Okay, so don't use this word outside of Hong Kong. Nobody will understand. So the church could still use and own the space of the priest quarters. It's still private places. So even in the Kwun Tong, St. John the Baptist, the school, the priests are still living there, which is okay. Difficult to see. This is one Tai scene, covered playground. Yeah. So it's so obvious, when I look at the drawing, it's so obvious that the church was very much prepared to use the covered playground for the liturgy and mass since the beginning. So in the 70s, as you know, the education became compulsory. Primary education in 71 and lower secondary in 78. So because of this, church didn't need to build schools anymore. Means that it will be the government to build schools. So it's even cheaper. The church didn't have to pay almost anything. So it was a great money saving way. And yeah, as you know, a lot of new towns were being developed since the late 60s. So a lot of public housings were built in new towns, and those housing estates always have government standard design school. So this is the property of government that Catholic Church could use as a church. Yeah, this is an example in 80s, but well, there were many. And yeah, so this is a government standard design school. So this was originally called school number 2 in the Butterfly Estate, but now it's called Yantak Catholic Primary School, and also it's St. Matthew's Apostle Mass Center. Yeah, so this is the hall on the first floor, but on the weekend it becomes like this. So everything is movable, and this is movable. This is, you need to hide this with the partitions during the weekdays, so all the chairs are movable. Yeah, so I found out 36 of them. Most of them were established in 70s, and well, it's school, and there's no such exclusive space of worship. But the building is permanent, and yeah, like this one. This is like a permanent parish, still using heavily, and church intends to use permanently. Some schools were used for transitional purposes. Means like there was one Catholic school used as mass centers in Tinshui, while the proper church, St. Jerome's Church, was under construction. But once the proper church was opened, then they don't need to use the school any longer. So there were quite a few transitional mass centers in the government standard design schools. And yeah, what is different is, yeah, this is clearly owned by the government. And yeah, it's completely dependent. Dependent on the government. Catholic Church is really dependent on the government, and so the church is merely a tenant of the government property. But still, so far the government is tolerating non-religious use. And yeah, as you notice, because the government provided everything, so this was really the cheapest way to have a church. Until the Y2K, the millennium so-called design schools emerges. So in the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, the church could not be involved in the design and planning of this kind of building. But since the 2000, around that time, now the church can be involved in the design, such as the new St. Peter's secondary school in Aberdeen, or one in Tunjum. But here, there's no space for there's no space owned by the church. So church is just a tenant. So nothing. Yeah. So if you there's not even the priest quarters, no priest quarters. So these are very small facilities. This is a parish office, which is extremely small. It's extremely small, and the parish priest is living in the nearby in a private estate. So there's no such space which the church can use freely. So there were not too many examples of the church with social services. Not too many, but it's like it's come and go. Yeah. So in the early days, in the 19th century and early 20th century, a lot of the social services facilities were temporarily or transitionally used as kind of parish church. One of the earliest example. I'm not sure what will be happening to this. I'm not too sure, but this used to be a provisional parish church for quite a long time. And also, like, the Christ the King Chapel in Causeway Bay. It's part of the social services facilities, but now it's like permanent church. This is a newer example, very interesting one. This is a Caritas building, but it's also a permanent parish church. On the first floor is what they call multi-purpose hall. So there are a lot of lessons, like karate, judo, all kinds of yoga and all kinds of things are going on. But weekdays, weekend it will become like this, and people bring an altar and so on. Yeah, so this is a very good example of the maximization and multiplication of the space. Yeah, so it was a social services centers, like a Caritas center, or it was a hospital. Sometimes they have exclusive space, but usually they just use the hall. But what is good about this is a permanent place. It's owned by the church, but some of them, like Caritas Medical Center in Kowloon, it's a government facility now. And as you know, Caritas is heavily subsidized by the government. So even though the owner is church, but the relationship is very interdependent. So the situation changed dramatically in the 80s, as you know. Hong Kong will be handed over to China, and at the same time, more new towns were coming. So this handover thing dramatically changed the type of the church. Yeah, so the previously, because the church and the government were very friendly, interdependent, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So there was no problem from the very beginning up to here for the church to use the schools and use the government money for religious activities. There was no problem. But suddenly the situation changed. Well, you know why, but yes, if you use the government facilities or even the private buildings, but which are heavily subsidized the government can take these buildings if they want. So church church changed its policy dramatically. So like this. Usually it has a permanent, exclusive space of worship, and it has kindergarten. Why kindergarten? This is not compulsory education, so it's a private facility. So government cannot really take this freely. Cannot. And yes, even though the church still got the discount, but obviously the the church paid a huge amount of land premium for this, discounted, but still a lot of money. Yeah, so it's kindergarten. Yeah, so it appears in the 90s. 12 of them. Yeah, usually kindergarten. It cannot be primary school or secondary school anymore. Too risky. Okay. Then you can also have preschoolers. Usually it has a seating capacity between 300 and 700. It must be permanent. To prepare for the future threat. And yeah, of course, it's owned by the church, diocese, and the church tried to be independent, but cannot be 100% independent. It's really impossible to pay the 100% land premium. Impossible. So yeah, church still had received a favor of the government, reduction, and nominal rent premium for the kindergarten portion. But it was very clear that the church was trying to have a distance from government. This is Qing Yi, hard to say, but hard to figure out. But this is there is a church hall, an assembly hall, and kindergarten. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of church with kindergarten was built in the 90s, but recently the Hong Kong doesn't really need too many kindergartens anymore, and also land premium is even more expensive, so the church doesn't really afford paying even the reduced amount of land premium. So the church devised, church launched their own development project. So this is famous, So the church and school complex built in 1950 was demolished, and that land was sold to the Chencom, and now this is a 42-story apartment building. So the church occupies the half of the podium. Yeah, the Catholic Church so far has only one example so far, but there are more examples for the Protestant churches. So usually it's mixed with residential, all kinds of commercial use. And yeah, one church has about 300 seating capacity. It is permanent, even though it's a mixed commercial building, but it is a permanent church. It is that the church space is owned by the diocese. This is nice, and church is completely independent. Yeah, because it worked with developer, so didn't involve any government. More recently, there is a tendency to going back to the Mass Center in Catholic schools, but with different conditions. Why? Because Catholics are increasing, especially in the new towns, and the rent premium is even more expensive. So this is a kind of a compromise I'm wrapping up very soon. So because you can't build new primary schools and secondary schools anymore, you don't need to build those kind of schools anymore. So this was an option, the new campus building in Chenkang, Tiegunling. So this kind of very similar setting, the lecture hall, is used for the Sunday Mass, and this is full of people from the very beginning. Yeah, so yes, independent. Even though the church has a huge loan, but still it's a private school. And even this is the most recent and the last example. Yeah, so the church has a difficulty to have its own space of worship. So, but somehow church still has to have some kind of public services facility, otherwise it can't have a new church. So this is the latest project of the diocese, the St. Joseph Church in Fanling. So this one, as you know, built in 1953, but it's too small. It's really, I think about 200 capacity. It's too small, and the district is really growing. So the church negotiated with the government to have this piece of land. So they are now building an extension of the St. Joseph Church. But this extension cannot be a pure church because you can't get a discount of the land premium for pure church purposes. So the compromise was that the new church will be multi-purpose hall for local communities. So the local communities, the non-Catholic people, will be using they will be using the extension for some kind of activities like schools, graduation ceremony or whatever. So this was the compromise. But yeah, it's a very clever way for the church. Yeah, let me skip this one. Yeah, so I'm not too sure whether you agree with my point, but to me, really, the physical churches or the space of worship is really the evidence, physical evidence of recomposition of religion in the secularized society of Hong Kong, and it just keeps changing, and yeah, it will be changing more because of the very unfavorable situation between the political situation. It will change a lot in the coming few decades, but the church never dies out. It's keep recomposed, and yeah, I always find it amazing, especially in Japan. What I find is empty buildings, without people. So I honestly admire the church in Hong Kong. And so this will be my last slide. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ayako Fukushima's presentation. Do you have any questions for her? Actually, I have one question. Just now you mentioned about church in the kindergarten because
Sorry?
of
Church
church with kindergarten.
Yeah, church with kindergarten.
And also there is also church in the tertiary institution.
Yeah.
So is because you say that they are private, so the church has more control on the premise, or is there any other reasons or strategies for the church, for the diocese to choose these two kinds of institutions to evangelize? I mean, it is easier to evangelize to the children, smaller children, their parents, or the higher education people.
I don't think so. I don't think it was the major reasons that the church established kindergartens and the higher institute of education. Well, first of all, it was the desire of the Catholic Church to have a university, Catholic university. Always, since the very beginning of the history, the Catholic Church always wanted to have a Catholic university in Hong Kong, but somehow they couldn't, and so finally they are still trying to. And the kindergartens, no, I don't really think it was the evangelical reason. It was more like practical reason. Because, to establish primary and secondary schools, because it's a compulsory education, you have to follow a lot of government regulations, and you have to work closely with the government. But whereas the kindergartens, it's not compulsory; it's a private, facility and education. So it's not too complicated to establish a new kindergarten. But since you don't have too many kids nowadays, now even kindergartens are not so welcome these days. Yeah. So then the latest churches want to have kindergartens because of these demographic reasons. Yeah.
You mentioned that we are living in a secularized context.
Yeah.
In such a context, which kind of architecture would you propose? A autonomous church building or a multi-purpose center in which there is the church, or mass centers in residential buildings? Which kind of, in this secularized context?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. No, I can't propose anything, but well, what I found is that every period of time, church found a way to create a space, to secure space, by all means. So there were not too many choices, anytime. There were not too many choices. You always, church doesn't have too much money. The money is the one issue, and space, you don't have space. And yes, and those places of worship were the products of some sort of compromises. Of course, it would be good to have the churches like a standalone churches, but you can't. Impossible. But when I visit a lot of churches in Hong Kong, I find it very meaningful to have social services center, used as churches, and people are very creative, to use spaces, maximizing, and they are very creative. But if you come to Japan, we have plenty of space and plenty of actually options, but no people, So it's like a completely waste of space, So, well, then what's the point of building, church building? Well, it's like, used like 1 hour, in 1 week. So it's a pity. I can't really propose anything, but I am sure that the Catholic Church will keep devising the new, all kinds of places of worship, and which will be always interest of me. Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
When you described a relationship between the church and the state, which I assume you mean church and the local government, you particularly used the word tolerate, which seems to suggest some form of tension or dynamic between the relationship between the church and the local government. So would you mind elaborate a bit more? And also, is this typical of Hong Kong, or is it similar in other Asian countries?
So toleration of the religious use of the non-religious space, right? It's, as far as I understand, it's unique in Hong Kong. Well, so far I've studied churches only in Japan and Hong Kong, so I can't really talk about other places in Asia. I don't know. South Korea may have similar situation, but definitely not in Japan. Because, as I said, there are too few Catholics in Japan, so people don't really need to use the schools or too much space, but too few people in Japan. And the tolerance of the government, it's, I think, more appropriate word will be, interdependent, mutually, cooperative, working relationship. Probably you know better than me that being a colony of the British, the British government doesn't want to spend too much money on welfare, social welfare for the local Chinese people. So the church was a very useful partner for the colonial government. The church is always willing to take up the social services, educational services with a lot cheaper cost than the government itself. So the subsidizing church, Catholic Church, and many other religious organizations, they are heavily subsidized, but it's a lot cheaper than the government doing educational and social services by itself. In Japan, 90% of the schools are public schools. But it costs a lot of money for the government, so we have to pay a lot of taxes. But that is also one reason that there's no room for the church to be socially very visual present in Japan. But now, since the 80s, the situation has been changing, and it's been unfavorable, clearly, for the church. Then I am afraid it won't be like 2047. It will be much earlier that the government may come to the church and may tell you, you can't use the school hall anymore, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. So even though this kind of thing, nobody says publicly and officially, but it's so obvious that, and everybody knows actually. It will change a lot in the coming 1 to 2 decades, and that's why I mentioned that probably there will be more more private homes will be used for mass and religious activities in the future, and small Christian communities may come back again in the near future. But that's not the worst always. That's the challenge. People may be more faithful, rather than being so free and so lazy in Japan. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting in different aspects. I'm not sure I'm 100% agree with the argument that that Hong Kong is facing a kind of secularization. I don't know. It seems that, all the churches I went to, they're overflowing with people and catechumen. And even in Japan, I don't know enough about to talk about Japan, right? Like every other street, there is at least 1 to 2 shrines where people visit, regularly. So I wonder if you could say something about secularization in our 21st century culture in Asia. In Japan or Hong Kong, I'm not too sure I agree with secularization, because I see that young people are going back to church. That's a very that's a good thing, but it seems that there's a kind of reversal going on for whatever reasons.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so the secularization that you're talking about is this decline. But the secularity I'm talking about is this. It's a slightly different concept. So obviously, like in the Western hemisphere, and also in Japan, obviously the churchgoers are fewer and fewer. But it doesn't really mean that religion is dying out. The secularity, which I was talking about, it's a changes in conditions. Yeah, people still go to church, but people go there. You go to church because you chose to do so. You don't have to go, but that was your choice. And other people have different choices, not going to a church or going to a temple or worshiping different kinds of things. So there's secularization. I don't mean by secularization that people don't believe in religion. No, there are always a lot of people who are religious, and even the ordinary people, who are not so religious, but a lot of people still go to the temple once a year without understanding what it is. So people are always spiritual. Almost everybody is people are spiritual, but people like you are very religious and faithful. But there are options. There are many options, and so the faith became one of the options. Then you have a right to choose. So that is what I mean, the secularity. Yes. Thank you.
Nowadays in China, they emphasize everything should be Chinese style, Chinization.
Yeah.
Would you agree to have building a church in Chinese style in China or Japanese style in Japan?
Yeah, you mean the style, right? Architecture. Well, actually, I don't have any specific preference in the architecture style because I don't design anything. So, localization of design is it's difficult. I mean, I've been studying the St. Francis of Assisi Church, which I like it a lot. But the same architect designed St. Jude Church, St. Anne Church, Our Lady of Rosary Church in Kennedy Town, the Church, Immaculate Heart of Mary Church in Taipo. Those have exactly the same design, the modernism design. So he somehow abandoned Chinese style. I don't know why, but because you are in a seminary all the time, so you appreciate the Chinese style, Sino-Chinese style, and I do appreciate, very much. But it's really difficult, and I assume that in the 1950s, I think people didn't have enough time to develop the design, aesthetics of the design. That's why I think he couldn't build any more churches of Chinese styles because it really takes a lot of time, whereas the modernism design, I wouldn't say it's easy, but simpler. So it's if people do the localized, design, then you really have to be a good designer. So it's not easy, and certainly, I would one day, love to see the church, Catholic Church of Chinese style in mainland China. One day, that would be lovely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
One question here. I'm quite interested in the example in Wanchai which you shared, which the church was built through urban regeneration. But so far, if I'm correct, there's only one example in Hong Kong. Do you think it's a model which we will see more often given the scarcity of land in Hong Kong? Or would this model be quite sensitive, especially when there's partnership with a private developer?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's sensitive because you may be changing the land use. The church may put itself in the danger of bleaching land use and so on. So it's not easy. And also because a lot of conditions must be met before this kind of project was planned. The lease agreement was made before the war, when the land lease was quite, flexible and not too much restrictions. And usually you redevelop the church. So that means you need to demolish, the existing structure. And which one you do? Can you really demolish? I mean, so that's that's also not easy. But possible, technically possible. You can find a lot of examples in the Protestant churches, like Methodist. There's one in Lok Fu. I don't remember the name, but Pentecostal, right? It's possible, but it's very sensitive and. Church has to be politically correct and so on. But it's a very, very good question. But maybe, in the future, yes.
Sorry, we have running out of time for the next section. Maybe we can discuss this after the seminar. Sorry for that. Thank you very much for Dr. Fukushima.
Yes, thank you.